Welcome in to Prime Suspects alongside Adam Bjorn and Prime Sports co-founder Joe Brennan Jr. I'm not Matt Landis. I'm Jack Fitzpatrick filling in for Matt as he's out on vacation gallivanting the world. So I thought we might as well give him the week off. We won't Wally Pip him. He'll hopefully be back. But how you guys doing? We're excited to have a nice little World Cup preview. But before we do that, Adam, we want to go inside Prime Sports a little bit, get an update on the previously announced bankruptcy proceedings that are going on inside Prime Sports. If you could kind of give us an update there.
So right now we're trying to switch market access in New Jersey. We're waiting on the DGE to get this over the line. However, with that potentially comes a close down in Ohio. It will be temporary. Through all this process, I had 2 3-team parlays to hit, 3 market accesses to have conversations with, and 3 regulators. And it feels like the second parlay is just not quite got there. So they've got us on the docket apparently for July with licensing. So when we turn one on and we close this sale, and it's been one hell of a 6 months trying to pull this thing off. So we'll get more details out to players. No need to panic. The only thing we can't do is take wagers when this potentially happens. But again, it's dynamic, it's fluid, we're back and forth. Kentucky seems all good. We're just in the last steps with New Jersey. Ohio seems to be the little sticking point right now.
I'm not the king of segues like Matt, so I'm going to say that here at the top. I don't have a clean segue to move on from there, but with the Champions League just wrapping, Adam, can you kind of give us an update of how everything went with the Champions League, get us warmed up for the World Cup that's right around the corner?
Yeah, good volume. A draw is always a good result in the end. So I hope there's a lot more of those during the next 6 weeks, because generally people don't bet the draws. So the more draws, the merrier. And even the 0-0 draws are very good at times, because it's just something that people generally don't want because it's very dull and boring, a 0-0 draw. So they're trying to bet that there's goals and overs and all that kind of stuff. So good result in that fact. A bit of back and forth. Arsenal taking the lead. Did get some PSG money from that situation, then the penalty. But overall, because it was a draw, everything else was kind of put in its place. And again, it was a nice little warm-up. The system held up. Everything flowed. The bets, the odds, the models. So it was kind of a good test for going into, I guess, next week now.
Joe, that's your favorite thing as we get ready for the World Cup. Any storylines you're keeping an eye on as you shake your head in disdain?
Well, before we move on to World Cup, regarding Champions League, because I watched it in a club with, some youthful would-be bettors who bent my ear the whole time on what they should be doing while having their live betting menu open. Here's my recommendation, whether you just bet the Champions League or you're going to bet World Cup. Know the house rules. Because I had one guy, when they won the shootout there at the end, not France, but, PSG, he's running around like a lunatic. He thought he just won $500. And he said, yeah, I picked PSG to win in injury time. And I had to explain to him, well, the shitty sports book that you bet at, I won't name any names, Fanatics, injury time is injury time. That was the magical mystery, time that was tacked on the end of the 90 minutes. Penalty shootout is not injury time. You didn't win that bet. And then you would have thought I took his money, But this is where I think the nuances of the beautiful game when it comes to betting them. Guys, you better do your homework on the markets that you're betting into, okay? Are you betting the winner of the game, or are you betting the first 90 minutes? So definitely walk in with your bankroll aware of what game you're actually playing. As far as the World Cup is concerned, this one, you know what? I think there's too much World Cup. Adam, from the bookmaking perspective, is going to say that's bullshit. It's having a Super Bowl a day for a month. And yeah, he's right. But the quality of the matchups, they've expanded the field. They've expanded the number of teams that are going to move on to the knockout stage. The top 2 group winners from each group, they move on. Now we have essentially 8 wild cards. That's where I think there might be some really interesting things to do, places to look, because, when 8 out of the 16 third place teams have to essentially become, fantasy football teams, and they got to roll up the stats, goal differential, all of those things. in order to be able to qualify for that like wild card 8 in order to move to the knockout stages. It'll be interesting to watch what those teams are. So of course, things have been lined up, so it's pretty easy walks for France, Spain, Portugal, Brazil, all those teams, arguably the US, to be able to walk into the knockout stages to be group winners. But looking at what the opportunities may be for some of those, less visible teams like Austria and Iraq and people like and countries like that, how many of them can make it to that wild card round? That'll be, I think, very interesting.
Adam, Joe said something interesting in there where every day with the World Cup is like the Super Bowl. So from your perspective, how is the World Cup over all of the games, group stage, knockout round, everything like that? What's the volume like? How do you treat it from the bookmaker's perspective?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been Americanizing it by saying 104 Super Bowls in 40 days, trying to get them all revved up and whatnot. I had the fortunate, maybe unfortunate for some, seeing the 2014 World Cup in the offshore market and how much Americans actually can bet football, soccer, whatever we want to call it. The other two World Cups didn't necessarily fit time-wise, but, I expect them all the places, including prediction markets, because they've just fallen into this beautifully with the fact that tourists really can't bet with state-regulated books because they don't have social security numbers and all that fun stuff. But I imagine there'll be, come reporting time from the regulators, whatnot, there'll be record numbers. Everyone will be blown away by how much this did. And if results have fallen well, by like mid-June, early July, I'll start buying my FanDuel and DraftKings stocks, because when they report that second and third quarters, I expect them to see a big boost if results fall correctly.
Over on the pitch, Adam, are there any storylines you're keeping an eye on? And mind you, got the correct terminology there of the pitch rather than the field.
Listen, I mean, I think the big story is the US team. Will they make it out of one of the softest groups made available to them? Or will they completely shit the bed and, just need to pack up their bag, call a day, let the women's US team just run American soccer? But yeah, I mean, that's the key one, I think, for all of it. I mean, they should get through. It's made fairly easy. I mean, I do hope Australia beat them in the group. I think Paraguay's a chance as well in the first bit, and Turkey I've got as one of my long shots. So while it sort of shapes up as easy, there is some challenges there. But I think that's kind of the biggest story of it all, is seeing what the US do, how far they go. Then on the flip side, I think Mexico, I'm starting to have a play around with them because they get all their games at home up until the quarterfinals. Do have a little one, a tougher one than what the US will have at that point, should they both get to that level. But then even in the friendlies, Canada have been doing all right. So I think it's the home teams and seeing how well they go and how well they advance.
Yeah, right now I would short the US team. They did not pick Diego Luna for this team. And I don't know, picking a defenseman with an ankle with torn ligaments or something like that, he makes the squad. It's just ridiculous. This is a tournament. I mean, it is a longer than usual tournament. Looking for depth, especially scoring depth, it's going to be, because you can't run out the same front two, front three, guys and expect them to be able to last through this tournament. It's going to be physical. There's going to be some teams like this is their shot. They're going to play as physical and as hard on them. There's not going to be any respect for shoe contracts out here, right? And so for the U.S., I don't know what Pochettino's thinking, leaving Diego Luna home when he's been like the energy guy for the U.S. men's national team. It's ridiculous. In my mind, it would have been like U.S. men's basketball leaving Kobe out of the Olympic team. He's the energy guy. He's the guy who brings everything together. I don't know. It just seems like everything to make sure that Gio Reyna's parents don't bitch and moan that their kid didn't make the team or something like that. But I look at this team. It's not impressive. And this is supposed to be our golden generation right now.
So it's safe to say U.S. men's national team, neither one of your guys is dark horse picks for this year's World Cup.
No.
God, no. I like Adam's pick on Mexico, though. That makes all the sense in the world.
Any other dark horses you guys kind of has pegged as team that's got some maybe a little bit longer odds that can make some noise?
Yeah, I mean, the ones I've sort of been looking at are Senegal out of Africa, Ecuador out of Latin America, Japan I think could go all right out of Asia, and then Norway was the one out of Europe. I think they're still 30s or 40s to 1 to play around with. But I'm just going against, which I always do, going against the top number ones. I did have a play on Argentina because I'm using money from the bankroll of the last World Cup when I was on them pretty well for that one. So I did get some of them at tens. But yeah, I'm just hoping that the big boys get caught up in this and, get rolled early on.
And on the U.S. men's national team, kind of moving attention back over there with them, Joe, you kind of gave your thoughts on their roster construction with Diego Luna being left off, being left at home, despite being kind of the bulldog, the high energy guy. How do you think this team will do with all of their defenders that they've added to this roster as they get set for a pretty weak group?
You can definitely tell that Pochettino is interviewing for Italian soccer because he seems to be defense first. What we were saying sarcastically before that, a well-played 0-0 draw, like in Italian soccer, that's beautiful. They love that kind of defensive stuff. So it just shows they don't have the midfield players in order to hold people back. So yeah, they're going to need a great wall of American defenders back there. And they're even bringing the war wounded along with them as well in order to be able to stabilize that. Christian Pulisic, he's not been playing well down the stretch here in Europe, since the beginning of the year. This is a group of players that were constantly told about their pedigree and constantly told about how young and fast and athletic and how much they've played together and everything like that. It has not panned out yet. So, yeah, tried out the best that the, pay for play select league teams of America have been able to produce. They just don't have that X factor that the other countries have. Okay. We're getting, and again, all apologies to this, but we're getting our third or fourth best cohort of athletes. This is not America's best athletes, and they just don't have the grittiness for it. That's why having a guy like Diego Luna is, he's the anti of that. He plays with that, balls out. I would die in order to win this type of game. I would die to get the ball kind of thing. But that's not something that filters throughout the roster. They just seem like a bunch of really, overprivileged upper middle class kids, which is what they all are.
Adam, how do you see the U.S. men's national team making it out of this group?
It's a soft group. As much as I would like to see Australia go deep, they're not very good at this game. Turkey is the one that came in the playoffs. I think they'll be strong. And Paraguay is sort of on the low end of the South American teams. So it'll be interesting that first game, how that all comes together. The lineup and all the talk about that, I don't think it matters who's in the team. It's built for them to have at least a run to the final 16. The draw's there, the opportunity's there. Let's see if they can actually show up and do it. For me, sort of always pegged this as hopefully that they were sort of getting better over the last 10 years. And it almost seems like, they've dropped off a fair bit since maybe 6-8 years ago when they started to rise, when, we knew the World Cup was coming. And it was like, okay, they're going to build this. The MLS is building. Everything's building. And I have this sinking feeling that they might Paraguay beat them the game one. Hopefully Australia beat them game two. And this whole thing's just for Americans going, get rid of the World Cup.
If you can go out there and find a way to make a market, how is FIFA going to practically pick up the United States and carry them to the round of 16 beyond putting them in an arguably soft group here? The number, let's start looking at penalties on teams playing against them, things like that, red cards on teams playing against them. They'll try and carry them. But think of it now, we're not the most popular country in the world right now. So when all this happens, we're going to be everybody's Super Bowl in this game. The world will be watching. And this team, this group of players, forget about can they beat the Socceroos or Turkey or Paraguay? They've lost to Antigua and Barbuda, okay? And by the way, none of us are talking about the world's smallest nation to qualify for the World Cup and home to some folks in the industry that we know very well. Curacao has made the field, playing in my hometown of Philadelphia. What about those guys? Can they pull it off? I believe the U.S. in the last 10 years has lost to those guys as well. The U.S. has been building over 10 years for the last 40 years. Right? They're always building. They're never arriving. I don't think this group does it. They need more Clint Dempsey types, more Diego Luna types, and what they get are kids with nice table manners. And that's just not going to cut it.
And for the U.S. men's national team, Clint Dempsey at home talking about this on his own podcast. and Diego Luna getting to sit at home. Maybe he'll start a podcast as well. There's always pomp and circumstance around the World Cup as we head into it. I'm intrigued to know with you guys where this ranks around other events that have this type of pomp and circumstance. Winter Olympics, Summer Olympics, World Cup. Those are the types of things that pop into my head. Joe, if you want to go first, where does the World Cup rank in there? Is it at the bottom? Is it at the top?
Even with Americans as lax as they are, even with some of the disdain I have, even though I've covered the game for 30 years now, it's the World Cup. They retired the trophy. That's the biggest thing on the planet, right? And everybody else is competing for second place. There isn't anything bigger. Adam's right. Like every day is a Super Bowl. There'll be billions of people watching a shit game between Curacao and Ivory Coast. I was just pumping them, and then I just go and I say that. But what I mean is not a marquee main game, right? We're not talking about like Spain, France. There'll be billions of people watching the Ivory Coast versus Curacao and hopefully betting on it as well. And by the way, I just on one point that Adam made earlier, I don't want it to go by without me kicking on it. The United States had 5 years or more of the regulated state market to figure out how do we take advantage of players coming from overseas in order to be able to play in our state licensed sports books. And they didn't do it. I mean, that was a no-brainer, an absolute no-brainer, and they didn't do it. And then you just, again, you got to kind of like scratch your head and say, like, why do prediction markets have all the momentum? I wonder why.
Kind of feels fitting with the fact that we also had 6, 7, 8 years or whatever it is to create a U.S. men's national team that could contend to win it, and they also fell short of doing that. So kind of a couple of shortcomings across the board. Adam, with action with Prime Sports and BetCris, where's the money flowing, biggest liabilities, all of that fun stuff as we get set for kickoff, and I apologize for the pun there, but kickoff of the World Cup next week.
So on the World Cup side, France, Portugal, South Korea are some of the bigger liabilities. USA, of course. I mean, you could put them up at any price. You're going to get some action on them. Oddly enough, I just looked, and Scotland's one that's one of the highest, but they are a big price. I've actually backed them not to get through the group, so that one was a bit surprising. Some other ones out there, Golden Boots, top goal scorer, Mbappe's getting bet pretty heavily. Kane getting money. Kai Havertz from Germany. The German ones are a bit of an opportunity because they have a really soft group. You know, they could win one of these games 10, 12, nothing. So there's opportunities there for some of these players to score goals early. Some other odd ones out there, top Asian team, South Korea is getting a lot of money and a lot of interest. And then in the African section, South Africa at 40-1, sort of the biggest loser in that spot. But there is so many markets on this stuff. There is so many ways to bet it. And that's just on the futures. Then you get into the games, and each game has 300 plus props and player cards and all this other stuff. So you really just take the bets, close your eyes, and then grade it at the end and hope that it all comes together.
Do you have any strategies, Adam, for betting the World Cup? Because you just mentioned it. There's so many markets. There's so many different ways you can do it. Joe mentioned earlier, you got to know your own house rules as well, because if you're betting and you don't know what the necessarily house rules are, that could come back to bite you. Do you have any strategies in betting the World Cup?
Well, just on that point there, make sure it either says top goal scorer or golden boot, because they're not the same thing as much as you may think they're the same thing. One has tiebreakers and all this other fun stuff to get to it. But, I mean, the strategy is, and this is where I feel I've had an advantage over the years, is when I watch stuff versus the data, those are the opportunities, especially late in games, having an idea of gauging pretty quickly, like how much extra time. The last World Cup, I think they were getting up to like 10, 12 minutes extra time after the original 90, which sort of gave opportunities to go, there was a number of goals in that extra time, whatever they're calling it. So there's sort of these little nuances then. Obviously, players' healths, injuries, all those kind of things come down to it as well. Understanding, once you get to the second phase, who has the stronger penalty, goalkeepers and things like that. But generally, the biggest mistake that a lot of places make is during the tournament, when they're updating the futures, group winner, team to advance, all these little other nuances, they're just not gauging it. I mean, futures odds are generally the weakest versus games. But when they come in and they update these things and they're looking at, someone wins a certain game, and then if you can break it down as to, okay, if they play this next, they play that, that's where you find some opportunities as someone who've just disregarded a team after losing the first game. this year, with so many third place teams having the chance to get through to that second round, there's going to be spots where you'll have the chance to get on a team that's just been disregarded after maybe the first loss and coming back at good odds. So there's just so much. I mean, at the end of the day, just sort of pick and choose, narrow it down to what you're targeting, watch as much as you can. Understand that, again, I think everyone knows this is a very low scoring sport for the most part. So you'll find at the beginning of games in the live betting, if all the action and all the possessions heading one way, the odds move that way with it. And there's often overreactions in that spot as well, because it only takes one, run against the play to score and the whole thing turns on its head. So those that watch enough soccer can sort of gauge if the odds are just moving off thin air and be able to find their spots. And then also understanding the subs and how the teams sort of structure and who may come on the end for opportunities for assists and scores and things like that. So there's a lot, but there is a few sort of little spots that you can sort of target in on. And I think the updating the futures every night, especially on a top-down level, if you sort of look at a Pinnacle or a Betfair or some of that, and then taking some of these other books against those, there's some opportunities.
Joe, do you have any strategies for betting the World Cup?
No, I mean, I look at the World Cup the same way I look at the NCAA basketball tournament. Like ahead of time, looking at futures, everybody's really chalky right now. You look at, most shops, like right now, Spain is the runaway leader in money. France keeping it close, but not quite close enough. England, of course, I mean, they're like the Notre Dame of world soccer. People keep betting them, even though something's not going to happen. They carry a large crowd. But I think what's going to be interesting is just like, what are those early opportunities like in the group stage? Like right now, if there's a game that for some reason, and I can't explain it other than it just lights up for me in the group stage that I want to look at. And right now I'm already, and it's short in the favorite, Spain against Uruguay. I just like, Uruguay's got all sorts of pedigree. Their players largely play in La Liga. They're going to know Spain's players probably better than anybody in this tournament. And I just like looking at that. And so it's more looking for kind of like little patterns that fit like that rather than anything big. Certainly not as bright and as well thought out as what Adam's doing.
And your last question before we get you guys up out of here. Of course, no prediction preview show would not be complete without Hicks, everyone's favorite. I think the mayor of Toutville has his music sounding off in the distance as he tries to keep things going. So, Mr. Mayor, if I can call you that at this point, who do you have winning it all? Do you have some finalists you're keeping an eye on? Do you want to keep the mayor of Toutville rolling?
You know what? It's not going to be England. Let's start at the outset. Really, I think, because this is such a long tournament, teams with a lot of depth, obviously, that aren't going to need to roll out or at least play their front line, like their top quality players long in the group stage or even in the early knockout stages if they draw some of these like yokel third place teams that are wild carding in. So you just have to look at like the Frances and the Spains and say like they can roll, like their second 11 is better than practically everybody else's first 11 underneath them. So I would just say, one of those two teams, if I had to pick one that I would prefer to win, I guess I would say Spain. And that's because I didn't like PSG winning the Champions League.
They can't be partying too much in Paris after. And Adam, any picks for you? Any winners, finalists, anything like that?
Well, yeah, that was a little disappointing because as I'm going through this, I'm just thinking, just go with the chalk. So I'm going to go deep, find something completely different, and let's just throw out there Argentina, Japan. There we go.
Oh my God. Like, so it's like a bunch of senior citizens against like Asia's second finest. That's a really interesting one. What I think is interesting is how far down Germany is. I don't think I've seen a World Cup in my lifetime where Germany, it was getting so little attention in the run-up, right? It used to be the joke, you play for 90 minutes, you have a penalty shootout, and Germany wins, right? You look at countries like Germany, like the Dutch, like the Netherlands that have pedigree. It's amazing how little people are talking about Brazil in this one. The problem that Brazil has is that they're always so loaded, so deep, so deep a team for so many years. You just look at this like right now and you're like, Brazil, right? But it would be interesting if you were looking for a dark horse. The dark horse, I think I would say the Germans, just because they've always had, Bundesliga, they just have a huge bucket of talent there. It'd be hard to believe that they're like right now. I'm looking at Kalshi and they're like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're down 8th place right now on World Cup winner money. I find that remarkable.
Should be a fun World Cup, guys. Appreciate you letting me tag in here and fill in for Matt this week for the World Cup preview. Matt will be back next week, and he'll be back with his King of Segways as well. So until then, have a great week, and hopefully everyone has some, I guess everyone can't be winners, but winners as much as you can be for the World Cup.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Prime Suspects. Register for Prime Sports at primesports.com and download the Prime Sports app. You can follow us on Twitter at @PrimeSuspects_, at Joe Brennan Jr., and at Adam Bjorn. You must be 21 or over to play on Prime Sports. Always bet responsibly and within your limits. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.